Good afternoon. Question for you all. Have you ever thought what it would be like to be an adventurer? Or maybe even an archaeologist? Or a bit of both? Ever thought, I'd love to explore my own town and see what there is? I'd love to explore up north, down south, or even across the water. New Zealand, Australia. Or could you go to Africa on a one-prop propeller plane? Well, I know one man that did. That man is Ashley Cowie. Ashley Cowie is an adventurer, a lecturer, and a Scotsman. He believes in maintaining Scotland's history. He believes in keeping up Scotland's traditions. And now he's become a lecturer at UWS. UWS in Ayr has just been accredited for an acting course. That acting course is the screen acting course run by Stuart Hepburn. Stuart Hepburn managed to get the accreditation in 2012, and Ashley's become a recent part of that 2012 accreditation. Now it's 2013, and he's teaching here at UWS. But I asked him last week, why go from adventuring and searching through all of this to becoming a lecturer again? It's a big jump. Come with me and we'll find out. Travel and kind of excursions that you do now.
The answer to that's my grandfather.
Really?
Yep, from about 4 years old, he was taking me around the fields up north in Caithness, where I'm from, in the north coast of Scotland, and he sort of installed an adventurous spirit into me. He asked me to question everything. And I looked at, you remember he was taking us out showing us snakes, and then he would take us back. He took me back to this wee snake that we saw 3 months later because he knew it was giving birth, and we watched a snake give birth. Everything was question. And he got me right into nature, so finding ancient sites and broken down crumbling buildings within landscapes was something he sort of taught me and showed me how to do.
That's a great way of getting into it. A lot of people have kind of school and things taking them into it. So having had that instilled in you from your grandfather, is that the sort of thing that took you to places like Costa Rica where you were commissioned to look into the magic flute? Not something everybody gets to do every day.
No, I can assure you won't meet anybody else who was commissioned to go and look for a magic flute in Costa Rica. But that came on the back of an opening for a television show. Going there. But prior to that, I travelled in many, many countries doing my own projects, my own research projects. But of course, like everyone else, I have to work to create the money to do that. So I was spending all my money going away in a few weeks a year to different places and being involved in ancient culture things, and eventually got sort of involved with people and clubs and societies and people who were involved in that. So I slowly got into it. But the magic flute's something different. That was sort of, a run up to a TV show. That was an episode that we practiced and tried out.
Did you find it in the end? Or is it actually a flute that you can hold, or is it non-existent?
Like every myth, there's a kernel of truth. There's a seed in there. So what we discovered after a few days researching this in Costa Rica was that ancient, the Native American Indian magic flute wasn't an actual artifact at all. It was a metaphor. So of course, after day 2 or 3, after not having found the flute in the cave system that it was said to have been in, we were sitting there after 8 hours doing this in this cave, digging. We had dug about 2 meters into the bedrock of the cave. The wind picked up. And I remember sitting in the cave, and all of a sudden we saw the flute. We heard the flute. The wind started channeling through the cave, and all these different acoustics were going on. And of course, that's what they're talking about. This was a sacred cave at the highest point of their sacred mountain, and right there was the flute, we believe. That's the magic flute, the most sacred part of their landscape, which was a cave with lots of holes, and like the wind activated it.
That must have been incredible to be sitting listening to that, realising it's not something I can hold, but I can be in this environment and hear it.
Indeed, and for everybody had that moment of realisation when it happened, including the Indian elders that were there with us. They talked about the flute, but had never actually been up there and experienced that. So that was quite a revelation in itself, to actually experience the reality behind the myth, if you like.
Yeah. Was that the myth that you went in the one-prop plane to go and find, or was that something different?
No, that was an adventure in Ethiopia. We flew from Jerusalem to Abu Dhabi in Ethiopia. We thought we were going to be filming there. We were in search of the Ark of the Covenant, myself and the crew at that time. And of course, we arrived at the airport and they said, wait a second, you've got another 4 hours to go. You're going to be taking a smaller plane. So we're taken to this back runway. 2 guys with tracksuits and pilot helmets cleared all the horses and animals off the runway. We got into a single prop plane and flew for 4 hours. And it was absolutely heresy. It was just so scary. It was ridiculous that we were even in that plane. It was almost going to be called off because we couldn't get insurance. The producer made the call, just get on the plane and we have to do this. So we were flying in about mountain ravines. We were over the top of rainforests, all sorts. And what he said was, the pilot turned to us halfway through and said, the reason we're flying so close to the ground is to minimise the trouble that happens if we have to crash land this sucker. So absolutely terrifying. 2 pilots in tracksuits.
I love the way you say minimise a crash landing. Minimise a crash landing.
Yeah, because landing upside down in a single prop plane's a lot better than.
Landing
Yeah,
in
that
the
was
sea.
indeed. It was a terrifying experience, but really good. Eye opening.
So from that experience, you're definitely not afraid of heights then?
I was terrified of heights. That knocked it completely out of me. That and a number of other adventures that we had where we filmed Legend Quest. But I went in there with a fear of heights. It wasn't when I was small, but when I got to about 35, I started being terrified of heights. It's so irrational.
Yeah.
But no, completely overcame that.
How did you've just mentioned Legend Quest, so I'm going to take it from there. How did you get into working with NBC doing Legend Quest, and what sort of things did it take you on to looking at and looking into?
Legend Quest, well, everything started for me after having a book published about 10 years ago. Then I became a historian on the Hour Show with Michelle McManus. I was doing sections there once every week or 10 days. And from that, I did about 10 or 12 of those sections, and I got a call from a producer in Los Angeles asking me to get an agent if I would be interested in doing a casting for this show that NBC had funded. So we did. They cast 160 guys over 2 years. They offered me the job, took it away again, offered it, took it away, all the things that happen in TV. And eventually, out of the blue, after not hearing from people for 6 months, I got a call that says, "You're ready to film in 3 weeks." I said, "Where are we going?" And they say, "Well, you got the job. We're doing 38 countries in 3 months." And from there, went to Los Angeles next week. We pre-produced the show and then took off and filmed it. So it happened so quick. In fact, I still look back and go, did that even happen?
What were your favourite countries you visited out of that? Because that's a lot.
I would say Scotland, probably. No, my favourite country had to be the Philippines.
Yeah.
I love the Philippines. And something that's really, this sounds a bit wrong, but I'll say it to you anyway. I found my most favourite countries were the poorest countries. Happiness exists where there's least resources. That's what I've learned. It's very true.
Because we don't appreciate what we have sometimes because we're so much better off, I find.
I find it really difficult coming home, and even today, and I come home, my friends and family and different people are moaning about not being able to get this done, not being able to get that done, after having seen people that do not own shoes. To have a pair of shoes, you're a rich man. To have 2 pairs, you could be executed because you're a thief and somebody else should have them. It's really hard to readjust. I still haven't. It makes you see things differently travelling.
Yeah, it does. Going back on the Michelle McManus thing, I'm really interested in what you thought when you created your TV show about Friday the 13th, because I don't know where it originates from, the whole be afraid on Friday the 13th things are going to go wrong thing. I know you did a programme with Michelle McManus on that. I haven't seen it, but what was it about and where did it kind of lead?
Friday the 13th is a really modern myth, right? You're talking like really only in the last 80 years or so. Nobody truly knows the origins of Friday the 13th, and that's me being absolutely right. However, the result of the urban legend of Friday the 13th has gone so far as if you go to Victorian New York, none of the hotels in New York have a 13th floor. If you go to the seats in airplanes that were built in the last 20 years, different now, they don't have row 13, which I think is absolutely brilliant because, of course, do you think anyone's ever sat in row 14 and looked and watched row 13 fall out of the bottom of a plane and thought, my God, I'm glad I'm not sitting in that row? So, I'm going to be absolutely frank with you. I do, and I've searched for it. I've gone for it. I do not know the true origins of Friday the 13th. I could tell you 5 or 6 different, but they're all hocus. Nobody really knows them. But it's kind of like the same thing as walking under ladders. We're a very superstitious race in the West. Very superstitious. And we have lots. But I could almost say if you went around the world and took every date in the calendar and went to a different country, you would find that every day in the calendar is unlucky to somebody. And conversely, you'd find that every day was held to be lucky by somebody else. So yeah, we did some work on that the Friday the 13th, and we did a small section on the Hour Show about it.
You did 2 others as well, didn't you, on the origin of festivals and the origin of... I can't remember the other one now, actually, it's gone out of my head, but the origin of festivals, it was Halloween.
Yeah.
The origin of Halloween.
And Christmas.
And Christmas. Did you find much you didn't know about when you did those 3?
Yeah, I had to reprogram everything I'd been taught in school. I can quite confidently say that the origins of both Halloween and Christmas and all of these other festivals that are deemed Christian festivals were being practiced by pagan cults in this country and around Europe for thousands of years. Pardon?
You're talking to the pagan choir over here.
There you go. So you know it. And of course, Halloween, for example, was a really, really important festival. It was called Shamain or Samain. It was a pagan festival, and it marked the end of the harvest, where all the foods were taken off the fields, the apples were gathered, and all the rest of it. And it was because it was the end of the light time of the year, the end of the sort of productive time of the year where we were getting survival foods. It was seen as a sort of sinister time by the pagans because here come the long cold months. It was as simple as that. But it was taken by the Catholic Church in around the 1400s and turned into a Christian festival, the Hallowed Saints' Day. But yeah, and the same as Christmas. You know, Christmas was being celebrated by the Romans and by pagan cultures for 3,000 years before, before Christianity grabbed it as such and turned it into a Christian festival. So that was a complete relearning. So every time I see a holy day or a festival day, yep, you can have days attributed to St. Bride, St. Jude, St. Nicholas, but they all have older Celtic significance. Always related to harvest, to fishing, to farming and survival. No hocus pocus, no ghosts and ghouls, just about survival.
Which is amazing about it. Everybody thinks that there's a religious link when actually it's really not. It's just kind of about them living their lives.
Living their lives, feeding one's children and coming home from sea, coming off the fields with enough to feed. That's what it was about before religions really got grip.
I'd like to look at the kind of the educational side of things that you've done now, such as your books. My first question would be, having travelled so far and done so much work in other countries, how many languages do you speak?
I speak 1. English and schoolboy French. I can understand Spaniards talking, which gets you around a third of the world, but I only speak fluently English, and I can come away with some French.
Has that been difficult for you, travelling?
Yeah, but I must say, you know, languages isn't something I was ever a specialist in. And to be quite honest, it sounds horrible, but I wasn't ever particularly interested in learning other languages. But communications is a completely different thing, and I will say that I have a way of going into any country, to any remote culture in the back end of a country, and using my hands and using things around me, I can have fluent conversations with mostly everybody I've ever met. It just takes time and being deliberate and, you know, using the skills I do have.
Being precise with what you're pointing at and what you're using.
Yeah, and using mannerisms. If I want to know how to get to the top of the hill, I would say hill. It's, you know, questioning and expressions are international, whereas languages aren't. So, yeah, I know.
It's a language in itself, really.
It is. It's the base for all languages.
Yeah. Well, on the educational kind of note, I know you've written several books, one of which went into schools. I know this personally.
You read it?
I did. The Rosalind Matrix and the Rosalind Templar. What took you into writing books about the two?
Okay, so when I was 32 years old, I discovered I had a real, a skill, if you like, for seeing shape, geometries, shape, proportion, ratios, and size. And I was absolutely fascinated with Rosalind Chapel, always have been, way before the Da Vinci Code came out and sort of glamorised it all. And I did an architectural study on the underlying blueprints that the masons, the actual stonemasons, would have drawn out prior to building that church. And I found all sorts of really interesting shapes and scales. And of course, back then in the 14th century, size, proportion, number and ratio were very, very important. Because of course they were related to numbers that were found in the Bible. So I was finding numbers in the size of the bricks through to the layouts and the lengths of these churches, and especially Rosalind, that could be related directly back to the parts of the Bible. And what I did was I just made a big book about this, and I took brick measurements through to all of the feature and ornamentation measurements and related it back to different sections in the Bible, and of course then found carvings that supported this. But I'm fascinated in what's underneath our noses that we just don't see.
Yeah. May I ask a slightly personal question?
Anything.
Are you a religious man?
No, I'm an atheist.
Okay, I just wondered because it's a church kind of related subject, really.
Yeah, indeed it is. I hate even saying I'm an atheist. I don't like to label myself, but
Agnostic.
No, I'm not even agnostic. That annoys me even more. I do not believe in superpowers and supernatures. I think what's on nature is more super than anything I've ever read in a book. But I will say that I'm fascinated by how other people and cultures view religion and gods and supernature. Fascinated by it.
Which you must have found in a lot of the places you've been to.
Oh, absolutely.
They've all got different gods and different...
And the reason I'm not a non-believer myself is because I've seen so many. I've lived with shamans, I've lived with Incan witch doctors, I've lived with spiritual healers, priests, clergy, magicians, cult leaders, and every one of them has the same kind of belief system, but none of them have shown me anything to convince me that there's anything more than that which I can touch, taste, hear, smell, and sense with every one of my 5 senses today. That's my sort of point.
I'm going back ever so slightly, but what was it like when you discovered the Incan sun disk?
Amazing.
Yeah.
That's
That's all you can say.
yeah.
It's
You can say,
amazing.
did I discover the ancients, the Inca sun disk? Some people say I did. Some people will say I didn't. We discovered the highest mountain. I went to the highest mountain in the Andes in Peru with a team of archaeologists and camera folk. We got up there. We followed a series of logistical clues. We went to that one spot and we found a chamber underneath an Incan grain store. So
A grain store.
yeah, it was a grain store built at 14,500 feet. And it was called a grain store where they gathered the grains, they took them up there to dry them. That's not where you dry grains. We measured up this building, took some scans underneath, and there was a 6-foot circle, just perfect for storing such an artifact as the disc. It's the highest place in the landscape, closest to the sun. So this revered sun disk. And of course, this is the landscape where the Peruvians were driven to when they were being, chased by the Spanish when they invaded in the 16th, 15th, 16th century. So, to a lot of people, we discovered the last resting place of the sun disk. Did I hold that lump of gold and say, here's the disc? No. I think it was moved a long, long time ago.
But you saw where it would have been.
Oh, yeah, we did that. And early archaeologists, today the site's a site of protected interest. Nobody could go there anymore. Nobody could really get there. It took us 6 days and a series of challenges to get near the damn thing.
Yeah.
And but yeah, I truly believe myself that that's where the disc ended up.
So having not seen that particular artefact and seen a lot of Scottish ones and held a lot of Scottish ones, how did it feel when you were elected as a Fellow of the Antiquities for Scotland?
That was a real honour because I was one of the youngest people to ever have been elected
Really?
in there. Yeah, you can go online and buy membership to lots of these sort of pseudo-historical clubs, but that one was founded by royalty in 1798, I believe. So it's quite an honour because it's invitation only, and you're elected by. There's only over 2,500 members, so you're taken in by election, and it takes.
You're still in now.
Indeed,
Yeah.
and it takes one black ball by one member for you to be out. So it's quite an honour if you get in. There's maybe only 5 or 10 people a year taken in
Yeah.
on the back of academic work, and I was taken in before having published anything, so that was quite an honour. Yeah.
Cool. That's fascinating, actually. I'm really interested in the work you did at Skara Brae, though. I'd really love to ask you more about how you got into that and what it actually entailed, really.
Okay, so you have Skara Brae, the best preserved Neolithic city or Neolithic town in
That's
the
the
world.
word I was searching for earlier.
Neolithic, yeah.
That's the word.
Neolithic means New Stone Age. Okay, so what you have there is the arrival of farming in Scotland, in Europe. And I've got a book, it's not been published yet, it's there in manuscript form, and what I've done is completely revised the known history of Skara Brae. Everyone talks about the Stone Age, but what I've done is gone underneath that. I've found artefacts relating to rope and cordage skills. Because of course before they raised stones in prehistory, they were catching fish, they were farming, they were making bags, they were carrying nets, snares, traps, they were masters in rope. So I found a complete set of data within the archaeological evidence to say the Stone Age needs to be updated and replaced with the Rope Age, and it's based at Skara Brae. So my studies into Skara Brae are not into the stones like everybody else's, but into the crafts, the skills, and studying the blisters in the hands of the builders that existed there, rather than the myths and the legends and all the rubbish that comes with standing stones and all the rest of it.
Does that link into the rope work that you looked into with Egypt?
Absolutely, completely, intricately linked, yeah. It's everybody gives Egypt, the building of the pyramids, the credit for having been the first builders in stone. They were building geometric structures using ropes in Skara Brae and Orkney 2,000 years before the first block was cut for a pyramid in Egypt. So I've come from Skara Brae. I think the skills and craft skills of rope measuring with cords, evolved from the north of Scotland and arrived in Egypt 2,000 years after it was developed here, point of origin.
So fascinating. My last question for you today before we finish would be, how does it feel being back in Scotland lecturing to a bunch of 3rd and 4th year TV students?
Oh great, I love it.
It's a big jump, isn't it? I mean, you did science festivals and things lecturing there, but isn't this a massive jump from that?
Yeah, of course it's a sidestep, and it's something that I love doing. I've always loved teaching. That's what I do with every book I write or every show I do. I live in Scotland, okay? So Indiana Jones has a home too. My wife lives in Glasgow. I've spent the last 2 years travelling around the world doing all sorts of crazy things. As you know, we shared earlier, I'm a type 1 diabetic.
Yes.
I need regularity and routine as much as I need to be travelling the world. This is perfect for me just now, and I love it. I love teaching. I love seeing people develop, including myself. I've never learned as much since being here doing this as I have in any other country. What I'm doing is going out there showing people things. I'm learning when I'm here. Although you think I'm teaching, I'm actually learning.
Well, I know they're learning from you.
Well, communication's what it's all about, and I'm learning how to do that different. So it's that's why I'm here and I'm doing it and I'm loving it.
Fantastic. Thank you once again for joining me today. That was a very in-depth interview. I've learned so much from that today. So I'd like to thank Ashley, and I'd like to thank everybody out there watching it today. That was absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much for doing that for me today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, I don't know about you, but I found that pretty interesting. I'm going to go and see where my adventures are going to take me. See you later.